Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremiah Dalton, and welcome back to the Long Island Legends Podcast, the only podcast showcasing the most legendary people here in our Long Island community. And today I'm joined by Nick Orlando, who is the owner of Gold's Gym in East Northport. He's also a licensed associate real estate broker with Compass. His family has owned and operated the Gold's Gym for over 35 years, and it's recognized as the very first Gold's Gym here in New York. He has a lifelong connection to the fitness industry with over 13 years of experience in real estate. He brings a unique blend of entrepreneurial drive and personal discipline to everything he does. And Nick is a firm believer in prioritizing self-care, and he credits his commitment to health and wellness as the foundation that fuels his success across multiple industries. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, and also thanks for popping my podcast cherry.
Okay,
so
first one. Okay,
first one, and hopefully I do a good job.
I'm sure you're going to do great. So for those of you that have watched my fitness progression over the years, right? Obviously, you need a lot of good things. You need good guidance, nutrition, etc. Right? But exercise is a critical component of that. And I can tell you that when I first started, okay, I did not like going to the gym. And the gym that I went to, which I won't mention, but the gym that I went to, I dreaded going, okay? It was crowded. It didn't have a lot of machines. It just really was just not an enjoyable experience. But then I came across Gold's Gym, right? And I know for some of you, right, there's probably a lot of people that when they hear Gold's Gym, right, they're thinking Venice Beach, Arnold, right? Like all these big muscle guys walking around. And they may even get intimidated thinking, I don't fit in there. But what I love about this gym is, and I love going, right? I love being there. The staff is friendly. It's super clean, okay? There's a diverse amount of machines, okay? So whether you're just starting out or you're as advanced as you can get with your physical fitness, there's everything for you. They have childcare, and there's always people in there, and you could have people that you could tell have been working out for 20, 30 years, but you also have your grandmother and grandpa. You have the person that's just starting out. So no matter where you are, you feel welcome when you go there, and there's always plenty of machines. You're never waiting around for anything. So that's a testament to what you guys have built.
Yeah, thank you. And it's been, an ongoing evolution over the course of years. And like every business, especially, in the gym business, there's always a new way to do things, new machines, a new way to exercise. And, for us, I think a big credit to our success, maybe compared to a lot of other gyms, which maybe, one that you might have been to, is we're, individually owned or, we're family owned. So, that quality control from a day-to-day basis, I think, makes us different from a lot of these corporate chains that, they put, they open up a place, they have their staff, a manager in there, and, they do their thing. But, there's not that, that extra passion or that extra little kind of touch that, kind of makes it feel where they feel comfortable, or, we can add different machines and, evolve and, kind of be nimble. So, I mean, that's basically, if anyone was going to say what makes us different, it is that, hands-on quality control, kind of family touch, which, ends up going a long way, I think.
Without a doubt. I mean, it feels there's like an intimate feeling to it. And there's something for everybody there. So I wanted to just kind of get into, if you could start off just the history, how your family got into owning the gym, the journey, and then we'll go from there.
So my dad actually got into that building and that business, well, for a long time. He's always been, selling memberships and, kind of worked as a manager in a few Jack Hill lanes. And in 1985, he got involved into this location. It was called Diamond Gym. He had, he wasn't the owner at the time, but got involved with a few guys. The gym that was there before ended up, going out of business. And, basically through, kind of just building it and getting involved, in 1987, he became an owner, had another partner, which no longer, obviously involved, and it was called Venice Beach Health Club at the time. So fast forward now to 1989, he ended up getting an opportunity with, the Gold's Gym franchise of bringing that name onto the East Coast. There was probably a few others, along the East Coast, but in New York, this was, the first franchise that ended up opening in the whole state. So, it was kind of a big deal at the time. And obviously in the 80s, 90s, bodybuilding, Arnold, that whole thing was really, a way different, kind of animal than it was now. So bringing that Gold's Gym name was really kind of a little bit of a fuel of, building the gym of what it was. But since then, he's, been involved, expanded into, another part of the building that's, what it is now. We have the 2 floors. And even when we started, which you'll know, it was just the lobby space. So when you walk into like the cardio area, that was actually, another part that he built into.
Okay.
So, fast forward over the years, I mean, just expanding into more space, moving things around like the group exercise room where all the classes were downstairs. He
Sure.
moved them up. So for him, it's always been, fitness related. And obviously, as he just kind of got his feet wet in there and, built it up, it's, kind of just been going ever since. And how I got involved was when I was a young kid, maybe in middle school, I worked as cleaning the machines.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
in high school, I worked the front desk. After high school, I became a personal trainer, then was
Okay.
working in sales. So, it's always been something that's been a part of my life. And, I was fortunate to always have a job there. And, I got a really hands-on way to not only see how, the gym industry runs, not only from working there, but from my father, but also just in, business and sales, customer service, which, you definitely get a lot of experience working
Yes.
in that kind of field.
Okay. Uh, Over the years, right? I mean, you've talked about all the different changes and
Mhm.
transitions that the gym has made. Um, can you just kind of discuss some of like the big transitions over the period of now? What is it? It's about 38 years.
Yeah, well, we just did 35, I think, or 36 this year.
Okay, so yeah, so 36 years. What were some of the big changes that have happened, right? Because I know that like I have children, my kids, their friends, right? A lot
Mhm.
of their parents grew up in the area,
Mhm.
so they've gone to this
Right,
Gold's Gym when they were kids and are
right,
still going to this day.
right.
What are some of the big changes that you could highlight?
I would say the services, back when we had two racquetball courts,
Okay,
over, again, as fitness evolves and,
sure.
just business, they weren't being used. So we knocked them down, then created more space for machines. And, so there was a lot of those little things as far as a, service
Hmm.
elements. But I would say really more the biggest changes, I think, were more the demographics. Like I said, early 90s, it was all bodybuilding,
Sure.
heavy lifting, big juice heads,
Yep.
kind
Yep.
of the name when you think of Gold's Gym, what it
Yeah. Of
is.
course.
And then as time went on, I would say we kind of filtered more into that, wider demographic of, someone just starting out, someone older. So, we kind of expanded our demographic in that way. So that's, I think, the biggest change. I mean,
Okay.
again, I can go through every service
Yep.
and
Yep.
things that
Yeah.
we've
Of
kind of
course.
changed. But I think just as people gave us a chance and as people got there and saw, the communal feel, saw the personal touch and, everyone again stayed local, I think, that's kind of what made people stay the longest. And you mentioned, in the beginning when people think Gold's Gym, they think,
Yeah.
meatheads, and
To
even to
be
this
fair,
day.
that's what I thought too.
Yeah, and to this day, and that's been kind of our, I guess, for lack of a better way, one of the biggest struggles of trying to, get people in the door to see that's not what we are.
Yeah. Sure.
Because before even giving us a chance to either, walk in or do a pass, whatever, everyone thinks, oh, I can't work out there. I'm not a juice head. I don't
Yeah,
grunt.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's been something that we've tried to actually, um, and to, I mean, maybe to answer your question even further, is that's, I think, the biggest evolution over time is to try to soften it a little bit.
Yeah.
You walk in, you have a water wall, a stone facade, the lobby,
Yeah.
you're not walking right into weights. So,
No,
it kind of
no,
brings
no.
you down a little
It
bit.
does. It's a
And
very calming
yeah,
atmosphere,
yeah.
you know?
And that's kind of in the atmosphere, I think, is the biggest word
Yeah.
of what we try to, kind of make everyone feel comfortable. So Gold's Gym, even just as a brand and, from the corporate element, and we've gone through a few different owners over, the course of our time, especially mine, is they always tried to, kind of combat that, bodybuilding
Sure.
mystique. And, they would try to, with their branding, their marketing, try to make it not so intimidating. It's actually interesting even now how, what's old becomes new again, is now they're actually leaning more into the, bodybuilding, serious lifting. And I think social media has a big part to do with that, and more
Sure.
so the younger demographic that's now starting to work out. I'm
Yeah.
sure you can see that in a lot of gyms.
Yeah.
It's a lot more younger. Again, another thing that I think has changed over the years is that it's, working out, I think, is cool.
Yeah,
You know,
sure. Well, we're
credited
gonna
to
get into that,
credited to
absolutely.
social media.
Yes.
So, I think, and that kind of happened, in the last 5 years, I would say. So, for us, and even from the beginning, the fact that we can kind of be on the pulse, see the changes,
Mhm.
get some industry kind of news, and kind of make the changes as they go is a big thing that makes us different.
Now, to that point, what is it now that you would say about the Gold's Gym brand and corporate that is setting it apart from everywhere else? Because there's a lot
Right.
of gyms, right? And
Right.
there's
Of
all these
course.
different franchises, constantly
Right.
popping up, and everybody has their preference,
Of
right?
course.
But at the end of the day, like, what do you feel like Golds is doing that is separating themselves from the pack? Because there's a lot of competition
Of
out there.
course, and it's a price driven market. So sometimes, regardless of how much service and amenities and value you can put in people's face, if someone wants to spend $10 or $15, it's hard
Yeah,
to change their
sure.
mind. But I think from Gold's Gym, to start from the top, the current ownership team, they're gym people. Before, it was
Gotcha.
all VCs,
Yeah,
venture
yeah, yeah, yeah,
capitalists,
yeah. Okay.
didn't really kind of have handle or a feel on the pulse of things. So I think that really helps that we have a gym based ownership team that gets it. I guess really, ask the question again, just because I don't want to go too much off topic
No,
with
but as
it.
far as what they're doing, like Gold Gym, corporate,
Right, right.
that's setting them apart, not from the other, just from other
Right,
franchises,
right. And I
right?
think the big and thanks for reminding me that, even though it
Yeah.
was only a couple seconds ago. But the biggest thing they're trying to focus on is equipment and lifting and strength and actually getting results. Where a lot of these other corporate chains, again, it's price driven. They don't want you to come.
Yeah.
They make their money off you just staying home.
Sure,
We
sure.
want you to use the gym.
Yep,
If you're
yep,
going to
yep.
come here, we want you to get in shape. We want you to see a change in
Yeah.
yourself. And they're putting, obviously, a big emphasis is that this is where you come to get
Yes.
get in shape, but also they're trying to put a big emphasis on variety of equipment.
Yes.
Strength training is kind of the big, again, kind of the most
Mhm.
popular thing now in the industry, behind maybe like Pilates, yoga,
Sure.
kind of the things that you see everyone doing. And the equipment variety is huge. What sets you apart from another gym, that we have, state of the art equipment, we have a variety of it, we have more than the next guy. And I think that's the market and the demographic that's really getting into the gym scene, is what
Sure.
they're looking for. Maybe it's not for everybody. Again, it's hard to meet everyone's needs, but we have the classes, we try to offer more. They push that. We have Kids Club, which I know you use, the
Yes.
machines, obviously. So I would say, in terms of what they're trying to do, is that Gold's Gym, it's been around forever. This is where you come to get in shape, and we have more equipment than the next business.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that because, over the years, right, so much about fitness has evolved,
Of
right?
course.
Even something like the bench press, for
Mhm.
instance, is now becoming where a lot of the big time bodybuilders,
Right.
right, have said, I don't do bench
Yeah.
press, right? Like there's like so many
Right.
advancements with machines,
Yep.
you know, just they say, I'd rather press with dumbbells than a barbell, right?
Right.
It's a better stretch. There's so much about, what stimulates the growth of muscles.
Right.
And it's, more and more, and I've hired like a lot of experts outside of my own trainer,
Sure.
right, just to consult with me. The prevailing thought is that as machines are becoming more and more advanced,
Mhm.
right, the ability to utilize that's what's allowing people to see such significant gains, right?
Exactly.
All things being equal. We're not talking about the, addition of pharmaceuticals or
Of
anything like
course.
that, but if you're just looking to naturally grow your muscles, like machines are safer, they
Mhm.
cause less injury,
Yep.
right? And they stimulate the muscle a lot better. Like
Right.
I do a ton of chest exercises. I've never once used your bench once,
Right.
but because that's just for me, that doesn't mean that may not
Of
work for somebody
course.
else. But for me, I have found that I get just an overall better workout
Right.
and less risk of injury,
And
right? And
that's
you
the
guys
thing.
keep adding stuff on.
Right.
I keep turning around. Like I have a trainer who I think I mentioned I work with virtually. New machines come in, I snap some pictures of
Mhm.
it. Next thing you know, we're adding it to our repertoire.
Right.
Machines that I know are very expensive and that are very rarely seen. Like
Mhm.
even my own trainer's like, "Oh, you got that? I wish I had that."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's a testament to what you guys are doing to constantly grow and
Right.
improve it for
and
people.
and we see the equipment that people are looking at and what's popular. And unfortunately, there's only so much space you can add new things. So a lot more now, if you want to add something, it's almost becoming addition by subtraction
Yep,
with a lot
yep,
of
sure.
stuff. And that's always kind of a fine line, because
Right.
you got rid of that, I use that every day.
Yeah,
So
I know.
it's hard to please, again, everyone, as I said. But the equipment is, there's so many more brands now. There's so many new, mechanical and just ways that these pieces of equipment, which I'm like, I never would have thought of doing this,
Sure.
but it's amazing. And the injury prevention thing, I think, is the biggest thing, especially with a lot of the bodybuilders, as you said, and just the average person who works out.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to bench anymore, and go through that injury, or if my
Yeah.
shoulder bothers me, I don't want to bench. But
Or
also,
even just to the fact that so many people too, with strength training, like it's hard to really go to failure on bench
Of
without a
course.
spotter. You know,
Right.
it's dangerous,
And that's
right?
the thing too, the
But you could
science
do that
now.
on the hammer strength
Yeah,
machines.
you
You know, if you
can
can go and then you can't go anymore, you just back off the
just
weight
drop
and
it.
you're done. You
And
know,
that's the thing too, even with like, everything now with all the, emphasis on fitness and health and wellness is that, the science behind it, that you don't have to use free weights, what's the appropriate rep range and all that. So I mean the science and the influencers now who say all you got to do is between 6 or 8 reps,
yeah,
one
yeah,
set to
yeah.
failure, so
Yeah.
there's a
Two
lot
to
more
three
of that.
times a week. You know,
Yeah,
the days of
that's
six,
it.
7 days a week. You know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of science that says,
Recovery, is the
yeah,
biggest thing,
you have a sign in the locker room that says muscles are mini without recovery,
Yeah.
right? You know,
So, I mean, the recovery element is what's really starting to take a lot of charge in the industry. And you said, like cold plunges, things
Sure.
like that, the saunas,
Yep.
which are, we spoke about, and that's, huge, is that wellness factor and that recovery of that. You
Sure.
don't have to just beat the crap out of yourself 5, 6 days a week. I mean, people still do. There's,
Yeah, yeah.
some kind of significance to that. But for the person who just wants to get in shape and still look and feel good, you don't have to really do
No.
as much as you think.
No, you
You
don't.
know?
So obviously the gym industry is undergone a lot of changes. And, I wanted to obviously talk about what sets apart your gym from the other gyms, which I think we touched
Mhm.
upon. But I want to talk about something that all gyms encountered, which is back in 2020 when
Mhm.
COVID,
Yep.
right? When everything shut down. Can you walk me through kind of your experience, what you dealt
course.
with, how you overcame it?
Well, the first thing, and I think just in business in general, is you can always try to prepare and plan for the worst, but sometimes you can't
Yeah.
prepare for everything.
Yeah.
And, leading up to that, and just, maybe more to touch on my journey with this. And,
Mhm.
I became a partner with, my dad when I was maybe, 25, 26 years old. One of his partners passed. I bought his shares. And for, 4 to 5 years, I was paying off the note. So the last payment that I made was February 2020.
Wow. Okay.
After 5 years of paying it off. March of 2020, COVID happens, we close, and
At
we're
the
closed for
time,
5
were you
months.
thinking this is just a couple week thing? Like, was
I did,
Yeah.
March 16th, I remember it, we closed, we're going to see a few days. I was just like, all right, I get a little vacation. I'm
Yeah,
hanging
sure.
out watching Tiger King on Netflix.
Yep.
I'm
yep.
like, this is great. I'll be back, then, a couple more weeks, more bad news, a month, 2, 3, 5.
Yeah.
So we were closed for 5 months, and it's not like a restaurant where you could do takeout. We're
Yep.
making zero.
Yeah. Yeah. yeah.
So that was rough. And, I mean,
Did people cancel their subscriptions during that
they
time?
did. We were dealing with that throughout. I mean, when we reopened, we were dealing with it. I mean, our business probably we went down 50%.
Yeah.
You know,
When did you guys fully recover from that?
it's hard to answer because our gross isn't really where it is. Because we lost a lot of the people who have been there and just I'm just going to keep paying. I don't really use it, but I have a great rate. So that was a lot of the business that we lost. So we're definitely coming back in a very strong way. We're not quite back there yet.
Okay.
The business has changed a lot in terms of, payroll and departments that we kind of started operating a little bit more lean when we reopened. But throughout that 5 months of being closed, I mean, it was tough, and, you had to really dig deep of, trying not to get into a hole of negativity and what's going to happen and what am I going to do. But, between my dad and I, and we have our manager, Chrissy, who I think you've seen with the
Yeah,
glasses,
sure.
curly hair.
She's been there forever.
She's
right?
been there longer than I've been alive.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
and
yeah.
she's like family to us. And,
Yeah.
really, I mean, we have a great team with everyone that works there, but it's really the three of us. So we were in there, each day trying to think of things, what to do, damage control, cleaning the place, getting ready to open, getting news from the state of what we have to do in order to be compliant, which was just a joke.
Oh yeah. yeah.
So, a lot of the things and changes that we kind of did, I think, kind of helped our success because again, we talk about what makes us different. You have a lot of these other corporate clubs that, are they going to be, making sure everyone's wearing their mask, which, I can
Yep.
talk for hours about the mask
Yeah,
thing. It was
yeah,
a
yeah,
disaster,
yeah,
but, had to do it. Are they putting in air cleaning systems? Are they doing sanitizing the right way? And people, I think for the first time and, at least since I can kind of remember, really cared about joining a gym that was clean and they felt safe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you touched
You
on the
could eat off the
cleanliness.
floor in this gym.
And, and that's, kind of our, again, little edge.
Yeah,
And again, we can credit at least something positive to come out of COVID is that, it kind of created a little more of awareness that I want to go to a place that feels clean. And, we did a lot of cleaning every day. So, I mean,
Yeah,
that was,
yeah.
that was the thing. I mean, we closed whether, you were there at the time that we did an intermission. So from either 12 to 1 or 1 to 2, we would close during, for an hour.
Okay.
Just to give us a little bit of a breather, but also to kind of disinfect and sanitize for them the second part of the day. But, throughout the 5 months, I mean, we just worked hard. We knew we were gonna, just be positive, come out of it. There were some tough times, of course, where we were like, what the hell's going to happen? Is the
Sure.
business going to come back? And even just from the years afterwards, I mean, they got rid of the masks, and a year later they put them back on. So,
Oh,
there was,
really? It
yeah.
was okay.
And again, I think just with, whatever, the governor at the time, just that, when the cases spiked again, they said,
Okay.
oh, masks are coming back. So,
Okay.
that
I
was
didn't
a nightmare.
realize that. Okay.
Yeah, it
My
was
fitness
short-lived.
journey started really September of 22.
Yeah, so you
So
kind of were coming in at the end, I
at the
think.
end, yeah. So I
Right.
never experienced any of
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, and again, I mean, everything that kind of happened when we reopened was just, trying to remain compliant, trying to keep the members happy. Who doesn't want to wear the mask? Who doesn't believe in this or that?
Yeah, of
This
course.
person's working out, their mask is under their nose. I gotta go. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was a lot of that,
Yeah.
and obviously just trying to keep it clean. But when we reopened, we really opened with a very lean staff. And, for us in this business and really any business, your payroll is your most
Sure.
controllable expense.
Was there an occupancy limit?
There was,
Okay.
just based on our square footage, we were really kind of we never really had an issue with
Okay.
it. We did keep track of everyone just in case the state came and looked. They never did. When we reopened, one woman came in to look at everything. She didn't even know what she was looking for. Never saw her again. So, really,
That doesn't surprise
yeah.
me.
So there you go. But yeah, when we reopened, beforehand we had a whole sales department, with salespeople, and when we reopened, we got rid of that and just had our front desk sell membership. So that cut a lot of payroll. We had a lot of other little staff and departments in place that we kind of got rid of. So a lot more fell on us. But again, to take something positive
Sure.
out of this whole thing is that it kind of gave us a way to open with a new business and make changes to things that we, always kind of spoke about doing, but, didn't
course.
really have the opportunity. So we kind of use this as that way. So even now, are we back to where we were? We're not, but we are, just because we're operating a lot more lean and our payroll's a lot lower than what it could be or
Sure.
what it would have been. And, now it's just time, patience, and
Sure.
just trying to do what we do every day.
What did you learn about yourself during that time?
Well, the biggest thing was that, again, you can always prepare for the worst, but you can't, prepare for everything. So, you're going to get punched in the gut and in the mouth every so often. It's just, your mindset that is the only thing that you can control, of being positive, knowing that everything's going to work out, and just focusing on your effort. And,
Course.
obviously for us, and I think a big credit to, us coming out of this. And I have to also give my dad credit because, he's, such a, tough fighter, grinder of a guy that, he kind of led the charge. And I kind of saw firsthand just that, what you put in is what you get out
Yeah.
and everything. And we really worked hard. And I think that really helped us come out the other side. So, being able to, not be able to plan for everything, but just, if, when things happen, remain positive, just work hard, focus on the things that you have to do, and everything will work out. So, that's kind of what I took from it. And it's been rewarding to see us come out of this.
Awesome. You mentioned your dad, so I want to talk about that. How old's your dad?
I think he's 65.
Okay.
Going to be 65.
Does not look 65,
yeah,
right?
he'll love that.
Keeps himself in great shape,
Yep.
right? What kind of inspiration has he been to you over the years? Seeing your dad always took care of himself physically.
Right.
Seeing that, what was that like for you growing up?
Well, I mean, he's been a role model, a mentor. We've butt heads, of course,
Sure.
just, like we would, but I'm blessed to be able to work with him and have him in that role to, kind of see, what he's built and just, learn little lessons from him over the time. I mean, seeing himself, keep himself in great shape, we always joke, and, every once in a while he'll look at me, flex and be like, I can still, don't step out of line because I can still take you. So that's, part of our little funny relationship that we have, which I love. But, obviously through COVID, as I mentioned, to really see him get down and dirty to really, get us through,
Yeah.
that was one of the, biggest things I've ever really kind of seen from him, to work side by side in that way. But, he's just, he's a great guy. Again, I'm blessed to work with my dad every day. We butt heads like,
Yeah.
any father and son
Sure.
or business partner. But, over the years, our relationship has really gotten even deeper as, I've, worked longer with him. As I've gotten older, we understand each other. I understand him, and just, a lot of the things and sacrifices he's had to make, and does to, provide and, be a
course.
good dad. It's inspirational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bring that up because, my dad was in the construction industry, right? Different segments of the construction industry, but I learned everything about construction, obviously in real
Sure.
estate, building homes, fixing and flipping homes,
Right.
everything in construction I learned from him,
Mhm.
right? How to stay 5, 10 steps ahead,
Right, right.
right? And so I bring that up because I know exactly what you're talking about,
Mhm.
like watching how he did things. And we were not meant really to work together. Like it was hard to work
Right.
together. But when I look at how like I handle projects now and it's to some extent comes easy to me, I
Right.
know it was because a result of working under him for so
Right.
many years, right? Like even though I hated that time,
Right. Right.
right, it prepared me for the career that I ultimately embarked upon. You
Right.
know what I mean? So I know exactly where you're
Yeah,
coming
and I
from.
can say that that's exactly how I feel too. I mean, we're the same in a lot of ways, but we're different.
Sure.
And I kind of heard the saying is that when two partners agree on everything, one of them's not necessary.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
he has ideas that I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. That only his X amount of tenure would know. So I
Sure.
mean, that's valuable, which I kind of pick up on that every day. But also for me, I'm a little bit more on the cutting edge with technology,
Of course. Yep.
automation, that forward thinking, which we're a good mix in that regard. And again, he's an old school Italian guy.
Yep, yep,
He
yep.
wants
I
it
know
his
it. Yeah,
way,
yeah, yeah,
which I'm
yeah.
sure you can know
I know.
too.
I had an
And
Italian mother and an Irish
yeah,
father,
so you got the
so
best of
yeah,
both
yeah,
worlds,
yeah, yeah.
in
So
one way or another. But again, it's over the course of our relationship, we know how to handle each other's little outbursts and disagreements. We'll
gotcha.
argue for a few minutes, and then a few minutes later, we'll be laughing and
Yep,
brush
of
it off.
course.
So I think that's just in, like you said. I mean, you can attest to that because you're in the same position.
Yes.
And you know, there's for me, I get into that mode where I'm like, all right, I don't got to hear it 10 times. I know what to do, but I think that's just, his way, but also the father and son
Of
relationship,
course.
which, that's I think what I'm going to have to deal with for the end of time. So,
Yeah,
it is
it's
what it
never gonna
is.
change. It's never gonna
Yeah.
change. Even now, like when I do, because I'm in residential construction, he was more in like commercial,
Right,
right?
right.
Now, like he's coming to me, like he's building a house in Pennsylvania. He's coming to
Wow.
me for
Yeah.
advice, right?
So,
Like, and then I
how the
tell him what
tables have turned.
the tables have turned, and then he comes to me, and then he goes back, a month later and complains to me,
Mhm.
and I'm like, yeah, but you didn't do what I told you to
Right,
do. Like
right,
you're doing this all wrong.
right,
And I like joked with him the other day. I said, if I ran this job the way you're running this house build, you
right,
would have fired me. Like,
right.
so it's like funny sometimes how the tables do
It's
turn.
exactly it. And, and he, and as you get older and, again, the patience wears thinner,
Yeah.
you get a little short fused. I have a little bit more,
Yep.
which,
Yep.
So, I mean, it's all those things, but,
Yes.
I think, I'm aware of it. He is too, but it's, all in all, I mean, I wouldn't change anything
Yeah.
with him, but, can still complain about it.
Excellent. So, as far as has fitness always been a priority? That's been something that you just have done throughout the years, or is that something that you adopted later on?
It has, I mean, I think just because of being, growing up in,
Sure.
the gym world, for lack of a better word, it's always kind of been something in the forefront of my
Yep.
mind. I've always played sports.
Okay.
So, being able to have a gym to work out at, and,
Yeah, yeah,
keep
yeah.
myself in shape and work out with my friends was always something I did at a young age. But, of course, as I got older and, as I've kind of learned to work out differently and just understand what works and what doesn't, it's evolved. Definitely not working out the same way that I was, years ago, which, I'm kind of happy I was.
Sure.
And look back and I'm like, you talk about like bench pressing and heavy lifting.
Yeah,
I still
yeah.
feel the pains from doing some stupid stuff. But, yeah, I mean, it's always just been, something that I enjoyed doing.
Of course.
I feel the difference of when I'm, in my zone of working out and doing the right thing compared to when I'm not, whether it's eating right, exercising, staying hydrated, all that kind of stuff. So, when I start to slip off, I'm like, oh, I gotta,
Yeah.
I'm not feeling right. And,
Yeah.
for me, especially with not only that, and, I know, with the real estate side of things, which I'm sure we'll talk about,
Yeah.
for me, it's just always, I have to feel good,
Yes.
because if I'm not, I feel it in every little part of my life, whether it's business, personal. So, it's almost like a little bit of something that I've convinced myself where if I'm not staying, in shape or taking care of myself one way or another, it's not going to do me any good.
Long Island residents, do you have a house that you want to potentially sell off market, your terms, your timeline, your way, or do you know of somebody that could benefit from that? Then definitely give us a call. You can reach out to us at 631-333-SELL. The number is below, or visit our website at SuffolkCountyHouseBuyers.com. And for any deal that you refer over to us where you are not the seller, the first deal you refer to us, we pay a $5,000 referral fee. The second deal, we pay a $10,000 referral fee. And get this, the third deal that you refer to us, we will split the profits with you 50-50. And some of our deals are multiple six figures, so this can be a life-changing amount of money. It could pay for weddings, it could pay for college, anything that you choose from. So please take advantage of this great opportunity. Once again, we're looking for off-market opportunities where a seller wants to sell on their terms, their timeline, their way. Well, I could speak to this. I played sports growing up. I played soccer, right? And I stopped playing soccer when I was like 18. then I went through, college
Sure.
and school and really stopped doing some of the things. I was never a gym person, right?
Right.
But I was always active, right? And I would bounce back and forth, different diets, right? But that
Right.
exercise component sort
Mhm.
of got away from me, and I would only exercise enough just to kind of get my weight down. And
Mhm.
then once the weight was down, I would stop, right? And a couple years ago, and what was really the drive behind me, making a big change was that, I encountered a lot of challenges,
Mhm.
right? Business wise, things were just everything that could go wrong at the time was just going wrong,
Right.
right? And it really had a mental effect on me, right?
Sure.
And I was so disappointed with how I handled all
Mhm.
those things, right? Because I just was not mentally prepared to
Right.
to embrace them. And I got through them all and came out even better. But the point is that I was caught off guard, right?
Right.
I was really caught off guard and I was disappointed and I was down in the dumps about myself,
Right.
especially just how I handled it, but also how I looked, right?
Mhm.
Luckily enough, I came across a trainer and, I reached out to him and off to the races I went. And so now I notice how much better my mindset is,
Sure.
right? The challenges that I have had since started working out are the same challenges that I
Yeah.
had when I wasn't
Right.
healthy, right? But I can handle things so
Yep.
much better,
Mhm.
right? The problems will never go away,
Right.
right? It's just how you deal with it. Now, for me, when I go to the gym and I see the progress I'm making, I'm happy with what I see in the morning,
Right.
right? Like that puts me in an
Yeah.
elevated state,
Of
right?
course.
How have you noticed something similar where it's not just physical, but it's a mindset, right?
Right.
People talk about mindset, but like you can't just sit there and imagine everything to be good. You've got to back it up, right?
Absolutely.
So I just if you could touch on that a
Well,
bit.
mindset is everything. And I
Sure.
think, especially with exercise, and, this is kind of that old adage that it's just as much mental as it is physical.
Yes.
And, to be able to, de stress and, kind of clear your mind, have that hour, half hour, whatever it is to yourself to really, kind of, work hard and work on yourself, I think is everything. When you, look good and when you feel good, it just makes everything else good. There's a quote that I really like and I think is just such a testament to this is that success takes care of itself when you take care of yourself.
Yes.
And I think, it really starts with you and with anything that you do and, regardless of what business you're in or whether you're a parent, whatever it is, if you aren't taking care of yourself, then it's going to be hard to take care of other people. There's that also this other saying, and I'm big into sayings and quotes.
Sure.
Is
Oh, I got one for you too, so
yeah.
don't worry. There's
Well,
one
maybe it's the
coming.
same one, but this one I like and kind of speaks to what the one I just mentioned. It's the oxygen mask theory. When you're
Yep.
on a plane, they say, put on your own mask before you,
Yes,
put on the
yes.
one next to you.
Absolutely.
And it speaks to that too. Take care of yourself, put on your own mask before you can, put on the mask for, someone next to you and take care of them. So the mindset, I think, with exercise and health and eating right is just, it's everything. And I don't think enough people really kind of understand it because they've never really been in shape or made that commitment to, better themselves. So they just go by with just feeling like crap or getting by. And, the
Yeah.
mindset is really key. And when I was, training for a number of years and that
What
was a
sports
job,
did you play?
hockey and lacrosse, hockey
Okay.
mainly, but hockey
Okay.
and
We'll
lacrosse.
talk hockey.
Yeah.
My son really is.
Is he into hockey?
Oh,
Yeah.
we've gone down that road big
Yeah.
time. We'll
So-
talking about that.
So we've been through all
Yeah.
that same stuff. But yeah, I think, from when I was a trainer and, a big thing with me and just what I kind of developed in my own little kind of style is, yeah, I knew the weights and I knew how to, get someone in shape, but I focused a lot on the mental part of it. So, and this was in my early 20s. So, I mean, I was still, a kid in my early
Yeah.
20s and, didn't have it all figured out. But, I kind of saw the connection at an early age and it translated into my own kind of, development over time that, before just saying, all right, you're going to do cardio X amount of days, you're going to do weights X amount of days, this is how long, sets, reps, etc. That, why are you doing this? What's your mindset look like? Let's try to, get your mind right on the task at hand and know that this isn't a quick fix and this is something that we want to try to, make a part of your life. And, as you speak to mindset, I mean, you got to get your mind right first to be able to say, this is something that I want to do and it's going to be a part of my life. But as you start to now exercise and feel good, your mindset just develops. And then from there, it's just, it's, sky's the limit.
It is, and there's a lot of people that talk about mindset, and there's so much stuff out there, and it's all positive.
Mhm.
But a lot of people think that they're just gonna convince themselves,
Right.
right, that everything's great and everything's wonderful, and they're gonna
Right.
do all these affirmations and meditations. And again, nothing wrong with that, right?
Of course.
But the quote that I like to use, I actually heard this from Alex Hormozy, right?
Okay.
Which is real self confidence doesn't come from shouting affirmations in the
Mhm.
mirror. It comes from giving the world irrefutable proof that you are who you say that you
Right,
are,
right.
right?
I like
So
that.
so at the end of the day, like when I get up and I look in the mirror,
Mhm.
right? Like I see the embodiment of everything that I
Of
want to
course.
represent.
And that's motivating.
I see the hard work.
Yeah.
I see the guy that did the, went out there and put the work in when nobody was looking, right?
Right,
Somebody
right.
that respects himself, somebody that can trust
Of
himself,
course.
right? And so again, when we talk about physical, right, it's not just about like looking attractive to the opposite sex or whatever that is,
Mhm.
right? It's about looking at yourself and saying like I've put in the work, right?
Right,
I keep my promises to
right,
myself. And then all of a sudden, right, you start to build that confidence because you
right,
see it. Not because you're sitting there and imagining, hey, I'm great, I'm wonderful, everybody likes
right.
me. You actually see it. And that's what that's about,
Right, and it's so and it comes down to just programming your subconscious to say that
Yes.
I'm someone who sticks to my commitments. I feel good. I am in shape.
Yes.
I'm strong. I have energy. So when you start to kind of take on this persona, as he mentioned, then it just your confidence just exudes, and things start to happen, and you're a better parent, you're a better everything.
Sure.
So it's a really powerful thing, and it's something that again I know this stuff. I try to read and, always, gather information and, think of better ways to think. And it's a
Sure.
lifelong journey. I still got a long way to go
Yeah.
and a lot to learn, but I see a lot of the little things, and I've, not only lived it and experienced it myself, but I've seen it from people that, maybe I haven't trained or maybe I have, but
Yeah.
just being in a gym for so long that, someone who comes in and looks like crap, feels like crap, and they, take on this, new kind of direction, and now they're completely different. And it's that's the most rewarding thing, I think. I mean, there's a lot of things just being in business, the gym specifically, but to see someone actually come in with a goal and achieve it,
Sure.
I love that, you know.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up because it ties into what I'm about to talk about next. You've been in the gym business basically your whole life.
Mhm.
I'm sure you've seen a lot of people come in,
Mhm.
start out looking one way, they consistently show up, they start looking differently,
Right.
right? What are the things that you have noticed about those people who have this real success stories of people who've been at your gym?
It's
What have they done?
commitment. They put in the work. They say they're going to work out X amount of days a week. They do it. They're going to eat right, and set a meal plan. They're sticking to it. So, it's commitment. And, I think the first thing before, and I touched on this of saying, all right, I know I have to eat this every day. I know I have to exercise X amount of times. They really want to make the change. So I
Sure.
think it has to come with, the, desire. They have that thought of, okay, I need to get in shape. And everyone's, again, reason is
Yeah, of
different.
course.
But they kind of have this switch in their mind that says, this is something that I'm going to do. I want to, be in
Mhm.
shape. I want to feel good. I can see myself being good. And then, that just kind of pushes them through, the hard workouts, the, monotonous meal
Sure.
plans. So, I think for a lot of the people, they come in with their strong desire that they
Yep.
want to make a change, and then they just commit to it, very, very simply. And it's hard, and that's why I think the first thing is, before putting a workout plan or a
Mhm.
meal plan together or whatever the case may be, is you have to really, want to do it and have that mindset of that this is who I'm going to become, and I'm going to stick to it, and and I'm going to do it.
Any major stories that you have of people, any real major transformations that you have that stick out in your mind?
Um, there's a few. I mean, no one in particular. Again, over time, people who have come in, maybe one in particular of a younger kid who, was well overweight, and just not confident, very, into himself, and just started coming in, working out. Some trainers helped him. He was there every day, and then started seeing progress, started getting confident, and ended up almost losing like a third of his body
Yeah,
weight. It was
sure.
crazy. Started doing powerlifting
Oh,
competitions.
wow. Okay.
So that's one that I think really speaks out. But in terms of any kind of like major one,
No,
I think every one of them are major in their
of
own right.
course.
But there's been so many people I've seen come in and make a change, stick with it. And, I think the biggest thing is not only like anyone can make the change and lose X amount of weight, but when they can actually, hold on to that,
Yeah, yeah,
weight
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
keep going, that's the most impressive thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, I feel comfortable talking about, my own physical fitness journey because from the time I was like 21 till the time I started my physical fitness journey when I was 37.
Mhm.
So about 15, 16 years, I went from being this kid that was always very skinny,
Mhm.
right?
Sure.
Never had to worry about his weight. My 20s hit and I couldn't eat the way I used to. I
Yeah.
had to be more conscious. But from 21 to 37, it was like this,
Right.
right? To the point that it got really, really
Mhm.
bad where like I couldn't even recognize who I was in the
Right.
mirror, right? And I was a guy that always was known as like the skinny kid,
Right.
right? And now, I would say my best transformation lasted maybe 6 months, 8 months.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? But now it's been several years. It's
Right.
so much a part of my identity,
Right.
right? That and I think that was the critical difference for me. It's like you could either lose weight or you could change your identity,
And
right?
that's
You
everything.
change your identity, you're going to lose weight,
Right.
right? But losing weight doesn't always mean you change your identity. So it's the latter, right? Where it was all of a sudden like I don't identify as the person that eats bad. Am I
Right.
perfect? No.
No, of
You know what I
course. We're
mean?
human.
But at the end of the day, like you'd have to used to have to drag me to go to the gym.
Right.
Now it's like something really bad has to happen for me to not go to the
Right.
gym.
Yeah, you want to. And that's the thing is the identity and the belief that I am someone who does this. That's I think the biggest thing. And even to say with, do any transformations stick out? I mean, I have to give kudos to yourself
Thank
because,
you.
I mean, obviously you're in great shape now. And even just from, following each other on Instagram and seeing some pictures before and afters, I mean, you made, a pretty, big change in
Yeah.
yourself. And I can tell it's part of your identity with what you post and, the conversations we've
Sure.
had and, seeing you work out. I mean, this is who you are. And I think, that's kind of the key is, when you're going to go through something, whether it's getting in shape or whatever, you have to say, I'm the person who is this, I'm the person who does that. And that was always something that I tried to, kind of impress upon people. And even now when they come in, oh, I'm feeling like this, I'm like, stop saying that, you're someone who doesn't stick to it. Stop
Sure.
saying that you feel like crap, you feel good,
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going to believe what you tell yourself,
Yes.
so that's where I think that subconscious belief system comes in, so it's very impactful and powerful to see the mindset and the identity, as you had
Yeah.
said, become I think the difference maker for a lot of
Yes.
people to stick with it.
And especially from a strength training standpoint, right? Like watching yourself, even sometimes you don't notice it in the mirror,
Right.
but like watching like with the weights that I stack,
Mhm.
right? I mean, they have the Arsenal incline
Yeah.
fly,
Mhm.
right? I started with that a year ago doing 100 pounds, okay?
Yeah.
225-pound plates on each side. Now it's at 220 pounds,
Yeah.
right?
It's a big increase.
It's a big increase.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a guy that I knew, big guy, big muscular guy. Actually, our kids both played soccer together.
wow.
And I saw him when I started using the machine, and he had 425-pound plates
a lot
on
of
each
weight, yeah.
side, right? And I was like, wow, that's a lot. And here I am now a year later, and it was 425-pound plates and one 10-pound plate on top of it. And it was like, wow, like I
Yeah,
got to
look what
where,
you did.
he was, And so that really like sticks out. And sometimes you don't always see it in the mirror, right? Because muscle growth can be very, very slow
Right.
once you kind of hit a certain
Right, of course.
period. And I'm at that point now, but now watching at the gym each time kind of hitting a new high, a new high, a new high, like that's comforting, right?
Right.
Like that gives you some peace of mind, some sense of accomplishment at a time where
course.
everything else could be going, awry.
Right.
okay?
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we all want a little instant gratification
Yeah.
here and there, but when not only you see yourself in the mirror and I look good, my pants are lighter, I added 10 pounds this week, I mean, that's,
yeah.
that's fuel. And it's a big, equally and just as much of a part of the journey as your mindset
Oh,
of actually,
absolutely.
those little quantifiable, kind of, achievements. So, I mean, it's all part of the equation, no doubt,
You talked about technology.
hmm
And I wanted to touch on that because what is it that you're seeing coming down the line with fitness equipment? I have my own ideas, but I just want to hear your take with things like AI,
Mhm.
right? Do you think that at some point or another, like not now, maybe not even 10 years from now, but at some point, like every machine's going to have some kind of AI component in
Yeah.
it that's going to like assist, right? We're
Right.
talking about like spotter assist.
Right.
You see some of these
Sure.
machines have these spotter assists,
Right.
right? Where almost to the point where like a machine, like you're going to have like a card and you tap the
Right.
card, it's going to have all your data in it,
Right.
right? It's going to set exactly where you were last time. Do you think that we're closer to that than maybe even I'm giving it credit for?
I think so because that kind of equipment does already exist.
figured in
and
some
they're trying.
capacity.
I think it's very niche and I think it's very expensive.
Sure.
So
It
I don't
doesn't
think-
make sense right now for most
Right.
gym owners to implement it, but as it gets cheaper and cheaper and more commonplace, right?
I don't think you're going to see a whole gym of it.
Sure.
Maybe they'll, introduce a little part of it, but I don't think it's really going to stick. I mean, maybe some people are going to like it. Sometimes with technology, it works for you or against you.
Yeah.
This isn't working. It's not reading my
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
it's not always reliable. Maybe it will be over time, but I think, maybe you'll start to see a little bit of it and maybe some like little specialized pieces that, are again are a selling point. This gym, we have AI equipment, so
Yes,
it's
yes,
come
yes.
in and try it. So, from a marketing, standpoint, I
Sure.
think there's some value there. I think more of the AI is going to be more, I think, back end of it. Like we use it, or I use it at least a little bit more in like, creating marketing campaigns,
Gotcha.
emails, chat GPT. So, just kind of to create a little more efficiency of, thinking of what to say or having it tell me
Yep,
what to
yep.
say rather than thinking of it. So, I think that's been the biggest application as of late, and where it expands from there, I mean, who knows? I mean,
Gotcha.
it's going like wildfire now,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
big
mean,
time.
how it's gonna adopt more into the fitness industry. I mean, there's always an article in a trade magazine that talks about it in some way. And again, there's machines that I think already, I don't think I know already kind of have it in place, but I think it's more from the back end efficiency
Gotcha.
standpoint where it's really, kind of embedded at this point.
That makes sense. All right. So obviously we've talked about gyms and your background as an owner. I want to dive into your experience as a realtor,
Sure.
right? Your background as a realtor. Give me touch on that a little bit, and then what you're looking to do to grow your business.
Absolutely. Well, been doing it for 13 years, a little over now.
And what
And
made you get into it?
so I was kind of coming at the time where I was, not really personal training anymore. I
Yep.
just didn't want to do it. I was becoming more involved with, the ownership side. And two buddies of mine, when we were kind of hanging, they said, let's just get our real estate licenses. So we took a
Sure.
class, went to Hofstra. It was, Saturday and Sunday in the morning, which was a tough class to make when you're
Yeah,
in your
yeah.
early 20s,
Yeah,
single,
yeah, yeah. Of
and,
course, of
committing to go in
course.
the morning. But, we got through it. And then really after that, I kind of just, said, this is something that's interesting to me. I always had that passion of trying to help people.
Of course.
And what I learned from being a trainer, I kind of, when I stopped doing that, I said, I still want to have a impact on people's lives
Yeah, yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
And, real estate was always something I had a fascination with. Growing up, I had some family in the business. So, it was always something that I was kind of aware of. And after I got licensed, I kind of took what I, almost philosophically was teaching with, being a trainer to this in terms of, all right, you meet with someone who's, wants to work out, you're starting with them in one place and you're guiding them. It's the
Yes.
same thing with being a realtor, whether you're
Yes.
buying, selling, I take, a lot of pride in, when I meet someone to really say, what are you looking to do, and find out their whys, their, all their
Hmm.
little things, and say, okay, this is the plan we're going to, put forward. So I kind of have a little bit of, that kind of fitness trainer influence on it. But over the course of time and years leading up to now, I mean, it's always just been something where I felt like it was my own. I had the gym business, and, I own it with my dad, of course, but, he started it. So I wanted to say, you know what, I want to have my own
Mm.
little project. And
Sure.
over time, it's really developed. I mean, I'm obviously looking to grow it, and I'm trying to, figure the way. And that's, always the fun part of me in a creative sense, is how can I make my gym industry and business work with this? Because
Yes.
they are different, but it's very similar in
They
a
are
sense where it's,
very much
it's
similar.
customer service, it's people. Again, I'm not perfect, but I think one of my, best skill traits, at least that, I can maybe say, is that I'm people driven and I
Yes.
like to be personable. So, that was the, I think, easy entry into it. But over the course of time, I always battled with like, okay, do I have to choose one or the other? Like, and even with COVID, I'm like, is this business for me? It's so hard. Of course, when I was, during COVID, luckily I had, the real estate stuff
Okay.
going on, and I was very busy, the
Oh
busiest I
wow.
ever
Oh,
was.
okay.
So it was lucky that I was able to kind of fill in some, loss of income,
Yeah.
from
Sure.
that. And, I got really, kind of really ingrained in the business during that time, because it was just, like everyone,
Yes.
anyone can sell anything. There's such low hanging fruit
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that really kind of initiated. So my journey in that was always, how do I build a brand that, yes, I'm a gym owner, but I also, I'm passionate from the real estate side of it. So I always thought it had to be one or the other. Over maybe even the last month or two, I've kind of said, you know what, I don't have to choose one or the other. I can
No.
do two things. A lot of people do. I don't have to be the best at this or that. I mean, I want to be the best, obviously everyone wants to be the best at everything. But, for me, my why comes from more of saying, I want to have the best gym, or I want to be the number one realtor. I just want to be the best that I can.
Sure.
I want to, be the best, husband. I want to be the best son, have a family, and just, kind of have that be my, motivation in life. And then everything else will just kind of fall into place. So, I'm very fortunate that I have, a gym business that, I'm, obviously very passionate about. But
Yep.
the real estate side of thing is, my own little touch on
Yep.
entrepreneurial, kind of, journey, for lack of a better word to say it. And, for now, I'm just really trying to build that and grow it and actually use the gym as a way to, have this network that fuels this. And I've done a lot of deals from the gym and members, and, I'm starting to be a little more aggressive with, using that, kind of sphere of influence to, you know, build up that side of things.
So I wanted to bring this up because, at the end of the day, right, your body, right, and how you take care of yourself, right? Like that's a representation of who you are,
Sure.
right? Like you walk into a penthouse, you walk into a mansion,
Right.
right? There's automatically this increased perception of
Right.
value. Whether people want to admit it or not, somebody walks into a room and they're in shape,
Hmm.
they've automatically got a leg up,
Right.
right?
Of course.
And again, it's not putting down, this is not fat shaming people or
No, of
anything like
course.
that. There's plenty of realtors I know out there that are out of shape that
Oh,
are
yeah.
fantastic,
Yeah. And
right?
kill it.
But if you don't know, right, and you just go in there and all things are equal,
Right.
right? You've got like a leg up, right?
Right.
Yeah, you come in there and people automatically see you. They say, okay, this guy presents himself very well. He's in shape. Do you feel like when you go on listing appointments, when you work with buyers, right? Like there's just that extra edge. Do you feel like that happens for you?
Of course, I mean, believe first impressions are everything, and just as we discussed from the gym, and I always like to pull a lot of experience from that and pull it into, my real estate side of things is, again, and you can attest just because you've been in the gym, you first walk in, it brings you down. You see a beautiful lobby, you see a water wall, you see all this nice design, you automatically feel, oh, this is a place that I want to be. Same
Yes.
thing with, real estate. You meet someone for the first time, a listing appointment. I make sure that, I'm obviously dressed
Yes.
nice, but because I'm in shape and, I'm, somewhat put together, that kind of makes people feel, all right, I
Yeah.
kind of feel good about this guy.
Sure.
Of course, then you got to talk the talk and
Yeah,
know
and you
what
gotta
you're
know
talking
what you're
about,
doing,
and you
you
got to know
know?
what you're doing. So, I mean, then it really comes down to, knowing your craft.
Yes.
But, having that initial first leg up and, first impressions, as I said, are everything, it definitely does help for sure.
Yes. And when you discuss helping people, so I know exactly where you're coming from. My business is predicated on, sellers that are in a jam, right?
Mhm.
They need to be able to close when we call it their terms, their timeline,
Right.
their way, right? We're there to assist them in whatever situation, right, they're in. And that's always been enjoyable, being able to help people make their lives easier,
Sure.
right? Now I get approached by a lot of people from the fitness end of things,
Mhm.
right? Like I have a trainer, he has this big online group. I've probably had the best transformation out of any client that he's had, certainly,
Right.
up there. So people have seen that over the years, right? And I've had now people come to me, and I always tell people first and foremost, I'm
Right.
not a trainer.
Right.
Okay. I'll give you feedback.
Right.
I'll tell you from a personal standpoint how you should approach it, but you've got a great group of trainers.
Mhm.
Lean on them for, the practical component. But I had a call with somebody yesterday, right? He was just struggling, right?
Mhm.
He's in the same fitness group that I am. We got on a call. I wasn't getting paid for it or anything,
Right.
but like I enjoyed it,
Right.
right? And it's just like you said, it's whether you're helping a seller with a traditional sale on the market
Right.
or a buyer or somebody looking to get into shape.
Mhm.
I was really surprised, like just how much like they tie together,
Right.
right? And if you're somebody that is there to help and support other people, real estate and fitness go together very, very well.
They
And
do.
people don't realize sometimes how much they truly cross over.
And you're 100% right. And I think people, when they kind of feel that I am genuine and I want to help them, they believe it. And I mean, that's a big part of, I think, my success, and part of my own little niche is that I want to help you, and they feel that I do. So I have this kind of saying too, with just like in terms of a little branding thing, and a big for me, and just kind of combining the fitness and the real
Mhm.
estate side of thing, which again, they can feel like two different entities so far apart, but they're so similar.
Absolutely.
And my kind of thing, which I am trying to put forward in my brand and my marketing, is that I handle your two greatest assets, your health and your home.
Yes.
So, to me, I think you can't get any more, similar and, any better than that.
Yes.
So, it's just a philosophy that I take. I think it's a little bit of a differentiator with, being able to kind of understand people and want to really genuinely help them, but also from being, owning the gym and understanding, having, people to work with, or that work for me. I don't like to say it that way, but
Yeah.
just to run a business overall, I feel like it really helps me when I'm going into a transaction, that I can be strategic, creative, and kind of help them in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, and everybody's journey is a little bit different, right? You
100%.
know what I mean? And so, the same thing when it goes to like physical training, like you have to approach each client in their
Right.
own unique way.
Right.
When you're selling the house, it's the same thing. It's
Right.
never a one size fits all, right?
Never.
Like that's why, people talk about, well, how a realtor is still relevant. And it's like, well,
Mhm.
just because, there's these brokerages that come out with these flat fee
Mhm.
listings and everything like
Right.
that, like that defeats the whole
Of
purpose, right?
course.
Like you need somebody that could tailor what it is to your needs,
Right.
whether that be fitness, whether that be their
Right.
home. And so you're absolutely right. Like you have to take each approach and tailor it and make it as individualized as you can.
Right.
Otherwise, then there isn't a need for people like you know?
100%. And that's the thing. And even just with, the real estate industry in general, with, we spoke about AI and these different models, law changes. I mean, I think there's always going to be a need for that, human connection. There's always going to need to be
Always.
people on each side of the transaction. Is technology going to change the way we do it? Is it going to shrink commissions? Maybe,
Yeah.
who knows?
Or it just makes it easier.
It
A lot
or
of
it makes
times
it easier.
it makes things easier.
Exactly. I mean, I think people sometimes want to make it harder than it needs to be. But in terms of the way that I like to work, and I mean, it hasn't always been this way, but 90%, and I think most agents are either want it or have it this way, is referral.
Yes.
So a lot of my business that comes is from a past client, someone that I know. So that entry and that first communication is always very easy. But when it comes to now a buyer, a seller, no two deals are always alike. That I always try to have it be where, okay, no two people are alike if I'm writing them up a fitness plan. So
Yeah.
I kind of take that approach where, all right, you want to sell your house. This is where it is, what you want to get, where you're moving, et cetera, et cetera. This is what we're going to do. This is how I'm going to market it. This is when we're going to try to get in contract. This is when we're going to start looking. So, I kind of almost write out like a detailed, like, workout plan a little bit, but, from the listing side of things. So, I think that's kind of an edge where people that I work with kind of say, oh, this, I feel good. I know what's going on. This is different. You are putting a little bit of a strategic creative spin on this. So that's kind of my little way that I like to do
Okay.
business, but how I also blend the two, industries that I'm in as well.
Is there anything that you do very different for marketing your real estate business than you do for Gold Gym?
Um, you know, Not really. I
So
need
they
to.
intersect more than you'd realize.
They do, like our marketing guy who does all our social media for the gym, does all my listing and marketing for
Gotcha.
that. So, I have a great relationship with him and I wouldn't change it because we work great together. I know his work and, it does
Sure.
work. Obviously, the gym, the way that we market that is different than how I want to market myself. I try to look at, things that work at the gym where I might start with an idea and see if I can bring it to the real estate side of things, vice versa. I definitely have to get better with, social media and marketing, at least for the real estate side of thing. A lot of my, I guess, marketing is really more from a networking standpoint where I'm taking, clients or people out to lunch or, things like that, or going to events and just trying to, build my network that way. I get the most enjoyment of doing that rather than, geographic farming or Zillow. I mean, I've done all of that and it's worked, but it's not really, I don't get that much enjoyment out of it
Yeah.
rather than really, kind of working with the people
Gotcha.
that I already have or, want to work with. So, I'm always looking for different ways to market, and I'm always trying to find different ways to do things. Like you can find something in a real estate email from, someone that says 20 lead generation ideas,
Yeah, of
to
course.
get business. All of them work, if you commit to them, but which one or two really do you want to build your business off of? And, I'm still trying to perfect it and, I'm trying to get more business and, grow it and see where I can take it. I've, had a lot of success over the years that I'm grateful for, but now that the market's getting tighter, there's a lot of agents now, of course. There's
Yes.
some that are really great who are, doing great business that I'm competing with.
Yes,
So
yeah. And then there's some that, you really got to watch out for.
right.
Like,
And,
it's bad.
and I've seen it all. And especially now when, there's that era of desperation where, again, I'm fortunate that I have the gym business to kind of keep me through the
Sure.
ebbs and flows. But, I treat the real estate part of my, life as almost like its own entity.
Sure.
And think of ways that I can, have them intersect and, market through the gym without kind of feeling like I'm double dipping or being, too pushy. Because that's one thing with me. And whether it's right or wrong, I don't shove myself down people's throats.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not my way. It's just I don't, not that there's anything wrong with it, but it's just not my intention. And over the years with, working at different brokerages, I was with Element for a few years, then Signature for a
Okay.
few, now with Compass. And all of them have been great, and I learned
Yes.
so much. And a big part of it was also, my own evolution. But I wanted to see the brokerage model from a lot of different
Sure.
places, and that kind of helped. But over the years, every manager that I had was just like, you have this big network at the gym, like call all of them,
Yeah,
get their
yeah, yeah.
emails, get their addresses. I didn't feel right doing that.
Sure.
So, I felt like it was a little too much, whether again, right or wrong. But, I do have a big network there that I'm starting to tap into
Gotcha.
more. I'm there a decent amount. I mean, I have the flexibility where I can leave for showings and this and that. Some days I'm there for 2 hours, some days I'm there for 8, it
Yeah,
depends on the day.
sure.
But, again, in terms of now trying to, build that side of things, I'm, trying to see in a fun way how they both can grow and work together.
Has there ever been somebody that you've helped in the real estate space, you ever get them to join the gym, right? Because
Oh,
that's
yeah.
not a bad thing either,
It's
right?
not.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, people who have moved into East Northport, hey, I own this gym, and
Yeah.
they come in and I give them a membership, and I see them all the time. Someone that I, either used to personal train or has been a friend of mine at the gym, ready to sell their house. So,
Yeah, so
it's
they
gone
go
both
together.
ways. And I always feel that when I'm able to do business with someone in the gym and real estate, like those are like such a strong connection and like such a deep relationship that I have. And I really, kind of cherish those relationships. I mean, even if someone does business with me in one way or the other, it's not like I don't, have a strong feeling for them any
Mhm.
different from the others. But, I've kind of found that when I am able to kind of cross both worlds with, someone that I'm working with, that it really, hits me a little different in the best way possible.
Gotcha. All right. Well, what I loved about you coming on is your story is so unique. You know what
Right.
I mean? Right. There's not many people who obviously have had the success that you've had with, this great gym, right? But also a successful real estate career,
Mhm.
right? So I give you a lot of credit for
Thank
being
you.
able to conquer, both ends. I do want to end off with from the gym standpoint.
Mhm.
What excites you about the future of the gym industry? And we'll close on that.
Well, I guess just, sometimes well, it's a great question. To answer very quickly, I think the unknowns of what it's going to be. I've seen it change so many times. I think, a lot of things that are kind of consistent with people just want a clean facility. They want, friendly customer service. They want a good selection of equipment. That's always going to stand the
Sure.
test of time. How things evolve, I think it's going to be, again, a younger demographic getting into it.
Yes.
So what
Because
do they
now it's
want?
like you see this, and not to cut you off, but now you see this with like the younger crowd where like they're not like drinking,
Yeah,
right? Like the emphasis on health,
right.
at least for this demographic versus, when I was 18, 19, it was there, but it was
Of
kind of
course.
tangential.
Right.
It's becoming more mainstream amongst the younger community, right? Everyone's
Absolutely.
more aware of like what could kill you, what's harmful, what's, longevity,
Yeah.
all these
And
things
we
are
have
coming.
COVID to thank for that.
And you
I
have
think.
COVID to thank to that, right? Like, I think that the younger crowd is much more health conscious, certainly,
100%.
than we were, 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a great thing. And, for better or for worse, that you have younger kids in there. I mean, it's great to see that generation and everyone want to do good things. If they can get off their phones and,
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
there's
pick
a
up
little
after
bit of
themselves,
that.
it's inevitable. And
I'm
that's,
guilty of that too.
hey, we all are. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
is what it is. But, again, little nuances of the day to day. But, all in all, I mean, it's, still a great place to, be. It's a great place, at least for me. And to get to your point, what excites me is just, who else, how many more people's lives can we change? How much more can the business develop? Like, between my dad and I, we have so many big grand plans that we always want to do. And, when's the right time to do it? And we want to change this, add that. So, we always kind of are very structured in the way that we want to introduce something. And when it's appropriate to do it. So, that excites me to see these plans, come to fruition.
Sure.
And maybe how they start with an idea here and how it changes to over here.
Of course.
But, overall, I mean, the business, I think, in the gym industry is going to, I think, be very consistent of where it is, of what people want, as I described, and, how technology and how different demographics, shape that. I think, it is unknown. So we'll see.
All right. Well, Nick, thank you so much for being on the show. I really
No,
appreciate it. It was a pleasure having you and hearing,
Yes.
hearing your story.
Well,
So
thanks for having me.
anytime. So that concludes our show, guys. And as always, if you know someone that is looking to sell on their terms, their timeline, their way, remember to reach out to us at Suffolk County House Buyers. You can go on our website or you can give us a call at 631-333-SELL. Thanks so much for watching.